Hello lovelies, welcome back to the channel, welcome if you're new, nice to have you here today. Today's another recipe video. We've got Halloween coming up, or Samhain as some of us prefer to celebrate it. So I will be going on a little bit of a tangent for today's video again with some of the history and background of the recipe. If you're not into that part, I will leave a time code for you in the description box below, so you can just jump ahead and skip the witchy aspect of the video. Okay, so today's recipe, the halioruna cake, is not 100% traditional or historically accurate because it includes chocolate, but it very strongly harks back to the Norse and Celtic traditions of ancestor veneration and communing with the dead. So the priestesses of the dead, the Halioruna, Helrun or Heliruna, some of the names that they were called, all pretty much have the same root, something with Hel, referring to the realm of the dead rather than the Christian version of hell. So these priestesses were revered as witches or necromancers or sorceresses who would sing or whisper over the graves of the deceased and try to make them speak, so as kind of like a form of divination effectively, or communing with the dead and with the ancestors. So we kind of in a way have our own roots in history for ancestor veneration and ancestor worship, kind of like you sort of see in other cultures over the world. However, with the advent of Christianity, all those traditions, which included vigils at the graves, burning candles, or holding communal feasts between the graves, and also leaving offerings of food on the graves, were deemed devil worship and declared heretic and were banned. So there we have another piece of Europe's native culture that was pretty much wiped out by the rise of Christianity. But enough of the background. Today's recipe can be shared with friends and family, can be shared with your coven. You can also use it to place on your ancestor altars as offerings. If you have the opportunity, you can visit the grave of your deceased loved ones and leave an offering there, which is kind of really nice, and I'm kind of sad that I can't do that. You can of course also use the spices and the ingredients to charge them for whatever means you need or want to achieve with them. That's always an option with any recipe, but I'm just going to leave as is and use this halioruna cake as offering and for like celebrating the dead. So enough of me waffling, let's get into the recipe. Okay, so for the ingredients, I've made a couple of amendments to the recipe that I'm basing this off of. For one thing, the original recipe gives the option to have either spelt oat, rye or whole wheat flour. Since I'm doing gluten-free, I went with the oat, but as I know that oat can get quite stodgy and quite sort of sticky and unpleasant if it's too dense, I'm mixing 3/4 cup oat flour with about 1/4 cup of gluten-free flour mix and 1/2 cup of ground almonds. Further, for the dry ingredients, I've got a teaspoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of baking soda, a pinch of salt, 3 tablespoons of dark chocolate, and it says a couple teaspoons of your favorite spices, so I've gone with 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, just under a teaspoon of ground cloves, and just under a teaspoon of ground allspice, and just like between 3/4 and 1 teaspoon, like I didn't measure very precisely with the ginger. Then we've got the add-ons, which is 1/2 cup of roasted hazelnuts, roughly chopped, 1/2 cup of currants, and 1/4 cup of cranberries. The recipe gives you the option to have cranberries or barberries. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any barberries, so cranberries it is. and 2 tablespoons of poppy seeds. Then for the wet ingredients, we've got 4 tablespoons, the recipe says 4 tablespoons of brandy. I'm using 4 tablespoons of cranberry juice. You could use any other kind of juice or any spirit you want to use. I think you could probably also use wine, whatever picks your fancy really. 1/2 a cup of honey, 1/2 a cup of grated apple, and 1/4 cup of melted butter or oil. I'm going with oil, and 2 eggs. So I'm going to give all of this an individual mix, and then I'm going to start mixing together. Now I'm just going to crack these eggs in here. Just a heads up, I'm not assembling these in a way that it says in the recipe, purely because the recipe doesn't make all of the sense, in my opinion. Just purely in terms of like how well things would be incorporated with each other if you were to do it in the way that they describe. For example, they say to take the flour and mix it in with the honey. Now that would give you a really hard to work with, quite stodgy mess. So I think having the dry, the wet, plus the extras probably makes a bit more sense. Right. We'll take our big bowl. And you see how this is sort of getting quite tacky already, sort of very sticky. I can imagine that this would be quite hard to work with if you were to sort of like start with the honey and the flour alone. And I think you just get like a better distribution, kinda like this. I'm gonna add in these. I'm just gonna fold that in as it is. Okay, and the recipe asks for a rather stiff mixture that kind of holds its shape when you plop it onto a baking tray. This is a tiny bit runny. You can see it kind of like smooshes back together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little bit extra gluten-free flour and just sprinkle that in. There's actually not much left in here. Yeah, it's still pretty flowy. So what I'm gonna do is sprinkle in some extra oats. Now this is obviously not oat flour, but it should do the job just as well. Right, this is still not quite solid, but I don't want to sort of fudge with the ratio of solids to water more than I already have, because as some of you will know, that gluten-free baking can be very volatile when you take away too much water. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to put this on a baking tray, I'm going to put it in an oven dish. So let me just prepare that. Right, this is going to go into a 180 degrees centigrade oven for between 40 and 50 minutes, or until a toothpick inserted comes out clean. So let's bake. that was today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. It was nice to have you along for the ride. If you liked the video, please feel free to hit that thumbs up button down below. If you really liked the video and would like to see more of my little machinations and ramblings, feel free to smash that subscribe button and follow along for future videos. But for now, wherever you are, I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! Videos, wherever you